What a wonderful organization. Can everybody give a round of applause just for YSB? What would our community be without it? So, there was a gentleman, many of you know him. He was a sheriff, and what a wonderful fellow. You know, I had the distinct pleasure of calling him a friend. Actually got to introduce him last year, and you know, there's an air of missing him right here in this room. What a wonderful man. His wit, his sense of humor, but his sense of humor had that sensitivity that cared for people and really cared about kids. And so Jim Trudeau actually went to Dave Schwartz, the police chief of Forest Lake many years ago, and said, you know what, I want to start this organization. Can I see a raise of hands? Now, not the board members, you don't count, and Jeannie, you can't do this.
We do
okay.
Count, Rich.
Yes, you do, very much, but not in this instance. Okay, so how many, shout out some numbers about how old YSB is. Anybody know?
35.
35?
39.
Just a little bit less than that. 38. 38 years. 38 years of programming. And Jim Trudeau was there that very first day, and this was his brainchild. So I'd like to introduce Mike Aschenbrenner at this point. Mike, would you please come up? And he has a few words to speak about our patriarch.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me in back? Yep, okay. I rewrote this yesterday, and I'd like to just start, and I'm going to start with one word and then I'll go on. Vision, 1976, Jim had a vision. We all have visions. We all think about wonderful things we'd like to do in life, things we'd like to accomplish, places we'd like to go. He saw a need and he took an action to go with that vision. Is helping kids, good, bad, or otherwise, going to make headline news? Not likely. But it drags us all here. As Rich said, it's not all about bad kids. We do a lot of leadership development. We do a lot of youth development, and we really hang our hat on the fact that hopefully they'll all come up and be wonderful, and they'll be standing up here someday, and we'll all be able to be retired. Right, Doug? In 2013, Jim came here. I'm not sure if Carol dragged him. She won't really admit that. But he was here, and he did this part of the spiel to get people to raise money. And as this tribute to Jim was formed up, one of the things that came across my desk and in my notes here was, if you needed $10,000, go ask for 20, and you'll get where you need to be. And that's the way Jim ran the show. And that's why we're all here, because it's all about personal stuff, whether it's something about us as a kid or a kid that we've had an interaction with or our kids. We all are here for a very personal reason. Tribute. In 2000, the first James Trudeau Award was created for law enforcement officers who do things related to youth and youth development or helping kids. Jean told me this when she handed me over the notes, and she said she got a call from Jim in 2000, said, hey, you can't name an award after me, I'm still alive. He had a wonderful sense of humor, and if you weren't careful or you told him to hold the mic up too close, he'd attack. The next word I have for him is dependable. If there was something related to kids in any realm, whether it's at the state legislature, whether it was at a hearing, whether it was at the county attorney's office, whether it was helping somebody else with programming or a program or dealing with that kid on an individual basis, you'd call him. And as Barb put it, he said, I'll be there, I'll testify, give me some notes and tell me where we're headed. We'll get it accomplished. Trust. Once you earned Jim's trust, you had it implicitly forever. Once he trusted you, You could ask him anything and you could count on him. And I know a bunch of his coffee buddies. I got a note from Joe DeMars talking about how the furnace had gone out one time, and he got Jim down on all fours, which I would have loved to have a picture of, and told him to count the blinks on whatever on his furnace and report back, and then he would tell him how to fix it. And what it meant was he had to run a dollar bill across the sensor a number of times, and it would come back on. And lo and behold, according to Joe, it worked. The next time he saw him, though, he zinged him. He said, I used a $100 bill, so it's going to last 100 times longer than it would if a buck, right? Now I'm going to read something that caused me to rewrite this. This will be from Ken Tolsman, who was one of the very first board members at the Youth Service Bureau and volunteered for a long time. Ken wrote, as a young farm kid growing up in Forest Lake, my recollection of Jim began in the early 60s, watching him pitch for the local Lakers baseball club. I didn't realize at that time that I would develop a friendship with Jim later in life, but nonetheless, I admired the guy for the way he could pitch. Everything he did, he had a zest. I admired him for the way he led the team. Then one day, probably a few years later, in the mid-60s, I happened to be with my dad when he stopped by to chat with Jim at the police station. Dad and Jim were good friends and always talked about everything. What I remember most about the meeting was Jim talking about the kids in town that didn't have much direction in life, and thought that stuck with me today as I toured the new Youth Service Bureau that opened back in '76, meeting the first director, Tom Oswald. A few years later, in 1980, Tom came to a JC meeting looking for donations for the Bureau. This resulted in me developing a good friendship with Tom and an invitation to become more active with YSB. I probably didn't connect the dots then, but I think what I was really doing was signing on to help a childhood role model on a mission for a worthy cause. I remember more than once walking down to the Sheriff's Department to discuss with Jim where we could find money for the Bureau. One of Jim's favorite sayings was, if you need 10,000, ask for 20. Financing's always a challenge for us, but I firmly believe the way Jim waved the Bureau's flag, it made the job easier for the rest of us. Along the line, the Bureau is still located in the professional building here in town, looking for a new, more permanent location. I spoke with John Juergens, a county commissioner at the time, about the possibility of utilizing his old office building. There was no question in my mind that Jim had something to agree with John, agreeing to sell his building to the Youth Service Bureau on a CD with $5,000 down. That's when we were down on South Lake. There's a lot of money that had to come up a long way, and it's paid off so many times over, increasing the visibility of the Youth Service Bureau and our place in the community. Although Jim was a busy guy as a sheriff, he always found time to help out whenever needed. Jim wasn't just a good community leader. He'd take an idea, he'd promote it, he sold it not only to the community but to the entire area. This translated to the Youth Service Bureau, not only being recognized locally for what we do, but nationally as a role model for juvenile justice. When I think of the number of lives touched by those talented professionals who walked in the hallways of the Youth Service Bureau, carrying out Jim's mission, I truly feel blessed to have been so lucky to have known this man and the many relationships I've made as a result. Ken Tolsman, Chair, 1984 to 1985, just a couple of years ago. Thank you very much, Ken. The last thing I have to say is that passion that Jim carried is what gets us all here. I don't know what your personal reason is for being here, but you could be sweating somewhere else tonight. But I can't think of a better place to be sweating tonight and for the best cause around, helping the kids of Forest Lake and the Forest Lake area. So I'm going to turn it back over to Rich. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Joe. Well, I have, likewise, I have a story about Jim, and it goes right back to this very night 1 year ago. I had the great honor to introduce Jim, and I said that I would make sure I wouldn't throw any barbs out at Jim as I introduced him, because surely one would get stuck in me, and that's the way Jim was. You could never beat Jim to the punch on humor or his wit. But after I introduced him, do you remember, everyone, he was up here for 45 minutes telling jokes and putting on a monologue that was just unbelievable. However, does everyone know that that very afternoon, he was released 2 hours before he came to this event? and he was that sick. In fact, right outside that door, after he was up here, and I don't think anyone could tell that he was feeling that bad, he just about collapsed on me and asked me some medical questions, but my goodness, what a man. And that's just so Jim. That's just so Jim. So, Kelly, Krista, Carol, we all miss him. Yeah.
All right, so I'm with the mayor of Forest Lake, Chris Johnson. We're here at the Black Tie Blue Jeans event. Can you explain a little bit about the Youth Service Bureau and what this event's about?
Yeah, the Youth Service Bureau is an organization in town that's a nonprofit that is essentially dedicated to serving and ensuring the success of youth. And so that it serves a wide variety of opportunity for youth. They can do leadership opportunities. There's also restorative justice opportunities. So no matter who the youth is and what the situation, there's opportunities for growth for youth through the Youth Service Bureau. And we're here to help essentially honor the Youth Service Bureau and raise funds for them.
Wonderful. And the Youth Service Bureau is such a strong part of Forest Lake. They definitely do quite a few different things. Today we also did a nice memorial to Jim Trudeau, who was the founder of the Youth Service Bureau and has done several things for Forest Lake in the past.
Clearly, he's one of the absolute icons of our city for the last 50 years, and so everybody here loved Jim and dearly misses him, and so it was definitely appropriate for us to honor him tonight.
All right, so I'm with Dr. Ottermeyer. We're here at the Black Tie Blue Jeans event for the Youth Service Bureau.
Black tie.
There you go, wonderful. So this is a great fundraiser for the Youth Service Bureau. The Youth Service Bureau does a lot for Forest Lake. Can you talk about it a little bit?
I'd love to. You know, everyone on the board just has a real passion for the Youth Service Bureau because it's all about the kids. And we have such good programming. It's not just about kids that get into problems, but if they do have a little bit of a stumble, this is a way for them to make a little midstream correction and start to move on with their life, get into college, do all the things that they really need to do, and maybe they just made a little error along the way. So we love it.
Awesome, wonderful. And one of the nice things that you guys were able to do today was to do a nice tribute to Jim Trudeau, founder of this organization quite a while ago, and has always been monumental in the city of Forest Lake.
Yes. Well, and Jim Trudeau, he's just, he was the patriarch of Youth Service Bureau. He really means a lot to us. His two daughters are here tonight, his wife, and I asked them to say just a few words. You know, they just couldn't bring themselves to say anything because Jim was just such an instrumental father figure, wife. But, more than that, he was just a community leader. It was always about the kids. It was always about the future for Jim. And so his legacy lives on through Safety Camp, and I'm honored to be part of it, what he started so many years ago, 38 years ago.